You must always have great faith in the human instrument. What that means is that what a lot of our psychological patterns, in my view, suggest are behaviors of uncertainty, and hence inaccuracy is created based on decision making. You see, if you're not aware of the football field and the lines, you will run out of place. And we see that similarly in life. You must become aware of certain things, but in your own unique journey. It has always been your own unique journey. If you think you're similar to someone, I'm sorry, you're not. You're actually very different from any person you know. And that's not because they can't understand you or you can't understand them. It's because we see life has a way of always knowing where to expand to. In other words, this existence, this universe, its expansion is simply first the expansion of the human mind to even think. So before man wants to become God, man must see what man is. And so that is the most important task of any man. So first begin to understand what your system is, what your being is. It's not important what others say. It's your own research, it's your own study, it's your own understanding. Because you deserve, and every human being deserves to see through clearer eyes. And I will tell you, maybe nothing is free, but compassion and clarity are your greatest guides in this reality. Because you must have awareness and sensitivity to the experience of your sense of other. When I say you must have faith in the human instrument, I'm not trying to, in a sense, tell you that you must stop seeing one illusion because this illusion is a better illusion. I'm not talking about this. I am saying that the reason you need to internally try to cultivate insight and ask yourself very good questions about who you are is to uncover more of your sense of understanding. Because right now, if you feel your understanding is off or something, it's because it's being compared to another sense. In other words, sometimes someone could say, I'm true. Okay, there's the story. I remember, I'm not sure what book it was, but I remember reading in this book, I think it's a book by Jane Roberts, actually. I don't know, but in this book, though, there's a story. I just remember that the story is coming from an entity that is not human. In other words, the entity is not physical, it's not from here, it's from a different place. What that means is that a human has written the ideas of a greater being. And so, in that sense, the context is an allowance. Every insane person is giving you a context of insanity, which is anchor. Because sometimes we live sane lives that become very thick, too thick for our preference. And when I say, by that I mean just simply imagine the life that you see now changing. It is not a joke, it is not humor that's going to help you when you ask some questions. There's some scenarios in life where it's not about humor, it's not about being funny, serious, anything. It's not about, it's all about your attention to what's going on. And your attention to what's going on is a natural process, and that is what I am telling you to uncover. Because we choose how thick the blindfold is on our eyes, guys. We choose this. And you choose from who it is that's looking at. And when I say you choose, I'm not trying to tell you that it's all your conscious mind. No, guys. There are some things that will happen to you that you may perhaps never understand why. You may have moments of understanding which you might feel they're purposeless, but they may come to you. But you see, it is because the reception of mankind works in more than just one dimension. That is why we are multidimensional. That is why I talk about multidimensionality, because I could, even before I can begin explaining some experiences, how extraterrestrial consciousness can behave, we must first see human consciousness and how ingrained it is in its beliefs. Back in the day, they wrote wisdom on stones. And I'm pretty sure that sometimes they would get so many ideas where they were like, there's no way. Right until I write one letter, I've had like maybe like 40 new ideas, you know? So when they understood that, they realized you have to detach from understanding, memory, and knowing. So what that means is you are, in a sense, in my view, of course, in a sense seeking this Mr. Within, a sense of your own greater knowing. Who am I? Why am I here? You know? It's like you don't need to just be a kid who's adopted to think about your past. Think about where you came from. You can think about it any moment, and you are comfortable with your experience when you realize that any sense of fear is an attention to something that doesn't need to be there. Clarity begins with becoming aware of where your attention is, where your spotlight of vision is. And you coordinate by always keeping it in more dynamic processes. What that means is the human body, the human being, in my experience, is not here always experiencing static harmonies. I mean, you might create a layout, a plan of your day, but in every moment of you throughout your day, from the beginning to its end, you're going through many different fluctuations, many different unknown factors are coming, many different things are happening. Life is just flowing, and sometimes it's meaning more than it has to, and you get overwhelmed, and some stuff happens, and sometimes you don't get overwhelmed, and sometimes you're not even aware of things happening, you know? And we see that this is all humanity. This is the human instrument. So we see that the human instrument, regardless of how much organization it can have, when it looks at its nature, it has to confront its own chaos. It has to confront its own dissolution. And when you have to, in a sense, because you're self-aware, you can think about your death before you die, it can affect how you're in the present. But sometimes it can affect it very well. Because you understand change is a process, and you realize, damn, the only thing that life is teaching me is that eventually I gotta let go. I gotta let go of my voice, my face, my shape, my body, my anything, but what will remain? So maybe perhaps, what can I experience? What can I be aware of that I perhaps already innately knew? In other words, guys, regardless, you are fed a story that you're going to die. You know it's gonna happen. Maybe you're young, you're not aware of it, you're trying to find the eternal moments, you know, of your life throughout your youth, or yourself seeing that. But I personally understand that because everybody is a unique energy, and when I say unique, because separately they're considered unique, you know? I mean, everything in existence is a holistic process, obviously, but we are seeing separations, and some separations don't understand how this wholeness of everything begins. Because guys, we cannot call ourselves separate without, and at the same time ignore the unity. You cannot be like, I'm separated, guys, but at the same time ignore the sense that you're also creating a definition of unification for yourself. You're creating that potential. You see, guys, let me tell you, we all notice that man's relationship with his body, with his mind and all that, works in various ways. We realize sometimes people are having experiences we're not. But we realize we have been having experiences our whole life. So we are a good experiencer. Regardless of the experiencer, we just know how to experience. Yeah, spot on. I know how to fucking walk, you know? So you know how to continue in awareness, being observant. So when you become observant, guys, this is where I have coined, I don't know if I've coined it, but in a sense, I'm saying it right now, and if I'm the first one, then I'm the first one who said it. There's a sense of, let me tell you, actually, it's not about that. It's divine attention in my view. What that means is that I'm standing here, I'm looking at a tree, I'm looking at a leaf, on the ground. And I see the different designs, I see the patterns, I see the color of the leaf, I see the brown against the green. And thoughts begin to fade, and I begin to have greater pauses in a sense, but at the same time, I realize that if my heartbeat can continue, so can my voice while I acknowledge my presence differently. What that means is that sometimes I may continue on speaking completely, but it is not in a sense a subconscious auto-cue. It is in a sense an allowance to observe life in greater patterns. Because once you can observe life in greater patterns, you will see more than your own patterns, so you shall no longer be limited to that. In other words, you guys are going to university, a lot of kids are, and when you're going to university, your ambition is to become some magical superhero for your environment. And you realize an idea of you, in other words, you don't need to live an unreal life until you find that moment of fame and suddenly things become real for you. You see, when we're kids, our mind is absorbing everything. And so if we are constantly given various messages and various understandings, we realize that we're being influenced by those images. In other words, there's a sense of realizing, okay, stuff I've seen in the past is helping me understand stuff I'm seeing now. What does this tell me about stuff I'm going to see in the future? Well, it tells me my sensitivity to what the origin, my sensitivity to the truth of my definitions suggests what my experience shall be. And you see, as I was seeing this leaf, I can see that I am a sense of separation, more physically abundant than this leaf, and I'm observing death. So, watching this leaf, I am observing the concept of death, and the concept of death is not limited to my own memory. Because I don't work with terms, because I don't organize my thought process with structured thinking before. Because that is fine, but that makes you insensitive. When you have to plan things ahead, you're not acknowledging the moment in the moment, and so it slightly becomes artificial. So I may prepare the greatest speech, but I realize if I'm not feeling the wind when I'm talking, I can't give you that sense of authentic communication that I want. Guys, before I define what I'm doing, I am authentically communicating for myself. And then the rest is how my voice is entering your ears and how gracefully it's being welcomed or it's being thrown away. Because it's not about just my ideas, it's about your ideas too. Trust me, because I'm a student of life before I'm a student of anything. And I see that when you're a student of life, you begin to see that the lessons are present within every moment. So every moment you can look at things and gain insight. You can cultivate greater understanding. And you see that it's based on your understanding of how dynamic you can be regardless of any static image you have. So our memory keeps static images of ourselves at times, but it is up to us to find its dynamic potential. Guys, you have a relationship with your imagination. The reason a lot of people don't feel they're creative, or if you're someone who's ever said this to someone, oh no, I'm not an artist. I'm as plain as this wall. If you've said this to people, you realize that you are actually creating a wall for yourself. Creativity is the act of creation, regardless of how you define what you create. In other words, I don't care if someone is speaking in ways which are going perhaps against my conditioning. I realize that is a sense of observance, but I could always step out of my conditioning. What that means is that my approach to all my problems is not being done with an analysis of what I deserve based on what I've been through in the past. In other words, just because you go through the hardest wreckage does not mean you deserve things in life. Nature speaks differently, guys, and it's a beautiful way of understanding it because it doesn't use words. Nature doesn't use words. If you can, it's simply that moment where you see perhaps an animal looking at you in the eyes, and you see that the animal is not using words to communicate, it's approaching your presence. So the animal is seeing what you are as an energy bubble. And as its own energy bubble is feeling it. But again, this bubble stuff I'm talking about, there's going to be another episode where I very thoroughly go through that stuff. Mr. Within's gift is a personal channel, you know. It's one where I find to be my garden of broken thoughts. And to a sense, I can say that we must have a sense of trust in where we're blown away. And that means that you must always follow the sense of new in your life. You must find that newer moment. And let me tell you what that means. A newer moment means the moment that is closer to your present. That's it. Because once you are always interested to be present right where you are, to explore an exciting life, you don't need to live in mental reality. Once you align your observance of life with just simply the access to the moment, you don't carry a lot of definitions. I don't know if people have seen the movie Spirited Away, but it's a very good movie with many good values. But above all, the movie, there's a scene where there's this innocent young girl who has no other tool aside from her innocence and her sense of just love for life, you know? And we see that kids have it. Kids are great teachers. And we see that something happens to the consciousness of kids as they're grown up, and it's how physical reality is engaging with how innocent and subtle their thought process was. So what happens when someone has a bad day? You don't go say, you know, your life is over, you need to end yourself. You don't go say something like that. You actually say, well man, why do you think your endings have become this? Why do you think you got this kind of ending? And once the person begins speaking about it, he begins realizing that there were things about it he always knew but never acknowledged. So you need to be able to very holistically and collectively acknowledge your moment of experience rather than individually. Because collectively means allowing a greater sense of your own existential expression, the way you're presented. So guys, there's sometimes ways where I feel I am being which have no name, which cannot be categorized, but they are with a certain intensity. So guys, the intensity of your experience depends on how much you are, it is written for you to, it is given to you to in a sense be able to explore your omnipotence, your omniscience. What is man's tool where he has to survive? It's cleverness. We acknowledge this. We acknowledge a witty mind, a mind that is always a step further. Now I want you to imagine from a greater mind that is seeing that every human being is trying to be a step further, but they're only trying to be a step further from human beings. In other words, once people perhaps watch two animals fight, you're like, why are we still utilizing that mentality of thought? And we realize we don't have control over how the world should be. We have a control over how we experience our own ideas and, in a sense, stories. Our walks are always silent conversations with ourselves, unless we choose with an intention that is as natural as the raindrop that hits your forehead when you look up. Beauty is present, and in a lot of my talks, I am, in a sense, to be honest, very closely, I guess, it's similar to Taoism. I'm pretty much giving you an experiential understanding of my sense of unknown. And my sense of unknown, some people call it Tao, you can call it Tao, you can call it whatever. You can call it, you know, the voice of the unknown. It's like, what do you believe, man? I believe in the voice of the unknown. You know, it's gonna probably freak out some people. Wow, the voice of the unknown. What does that mean? Does that mean, because I don't understand what this guy is saying, he's crazy? Well, yes, civilian. Insanity is simply the awareness that some two things are separated insanely in depth. So when human beings, you know what's an insane moment? When two human beings were approaching the same concept in the same way, unless suddenly they recognize their past and they realize they come from different contexts. So once you see that the way you talked about that story and the way you approached that story, or the way you said that joke or whatever you said, it's not going to be approached just like how you're approaching it. Everyone has free will into allowing in a sense what they feel they need to receive from their moments. And I'm telling you, think of ability, think of greatness of ability, and think of the thinker that no longer needs to think about it but is always present and doing it. Because guys, let me tell you why I don't call it God. Let me tell you God, because that's an additional step they give you. It's not that they give you, but it's kind of like given, because nobody's bothered to adjust the system, or maybe it wasn't needed. What I mean is that you see in a lot of yogic and meditative practice, they're saying, look at this personality of God. Look at these personalities of God. And I don't think that's wrong. They're saying, look at these ways of being alive. And you do these, you shall see God. So they're saying in one state of consciousness, you can see God. You know, if you do some things, you'll be tuned to a certain frequency. But at the same time, I believe, not unless your remembrance is your teacher. If your remembrance is your teacher, and guys, when I say remembrance, this is deep remembrance. This is things that you will remember, but others shall think you're from another terrace. We are the playfulness that is both the construction and destruction of the forms of life. And our observance of the construction and destruction of form of this chain is a sense of untouchable awareness. You have a very clear sense of looking at life, but you must align your ideas and you must break your walls. But trust me, what the Guru saw back then was that it's not about one man controlling other men. No. It's about each man discovering in their own depths, in their own hidden depths, of where they are. Because trust me, if you're a lion and you think you're a sheep, you just need a mirror to just wake up. You know, and that's what every human being needs, because the human part is of course the human form and the evolution and the apes gift to us in a way. But to experience an existence that is unified, it doesn't matter what story you tell yourself. It occurs. It becomes present. In other words, I was so interested in reading books until I sat in nature and I realized there's a different presence, there's a different intelligence that man is not studying. And not that man, some men are. Some very rebellious people are speaking of greater views. In other words, trust me, you don't just need one view in your life. You need equilibrium. You don't need you don't need to just conform to one state of being. Because you're conforming to one state of being, you're not even conforming to that state of being. You're conforming to your own experience. In other words, guys, when we allow people to become greater voices in our, how do I say it? In other words, I can tell you as many of my experiences and the way I've climbed the mountain, but you must feel the rocks. And you must realize that, damn, you might be a great climber at a different path of the mountain. In other words, you see, some guy perhaps might have ate too much commercial food and is let's say chubby, right? And one guy is very thin and one guy is regular athletic, right? When they look at the mountain they have to climb in life, they have different ideas about themselves, but they all deserve to climb it. Everyone is allowed to climb a mountain. So you see, when mankind is given visions of a free world, It is only his ignorance and his acceptance of his condition that keeps him there. You're accepting, guys, this is kind of weird, but you like being in the state you are right now. Because perhaps maybe look at it this way, there's something you need to observe. If you constantly see you're going into the same relationship, you're going into the same pattern of thought, because you need to observe the pattern. And trust me, guys, when you observe something, that is when cultivating insight begins. Cultivating insight is silent observance. It's remembrance. That is why in Remembrance Day people are silent. Because the silence at times communicates the power that is in the peak of man's voice. And man has spoken slightly too much. In this damn age, you're like, wow, humans really created some stuff, right? And it's not about rejection, it's not about letting go of one cloth to, pick up another one to, clean your hands with. It's about your experience of all your diverse conditions. All discrimination has come into your experience and in a sense is active in your sense of awareness to it. The human being must find his love and all his definition and experiences of love expanding into a holistic moment of appreciating all that is here. Gratefulness is the refresh button for your consciousness. The acts of compassion are refresh buttons on your consciousness. They get rid of your impurities. In other words, the more compassionate you are, the more you feel like you're like growth, because you're not making the same decisions. You're behaving differently. You see that once you realize it was a better idea to help people rather than to steal from them, you will be like, wow, why didn't I do it this sooner? Because you see, guys, the Buddha said something which I realized how ignorant I was. And I'm just speaking for myself here in a sense, but maybe perhaps everyone who's thought in such a way, everyone who's entered this tunnel. The Buddha understood that suffering is something that is in every man's condition. And what that means is that I am not like someone who's here to give you the right words to say. I'm not here to be like that. I'm simply here to tell you that in my own experience of Buddhist practice, Tibetan Buddhism, or that book which I found which gave me such instruction, I noticed that what is suffering is in essence a sensitivity that everyone knows they're going to die, so wow, they're going to freak out. So be nice. And I'm talking about this in a very blunt way, but at the same time, it doesn't need to be, I guess, received, inhaled in that way. You know? What is suffering is when man sees that the meaning of life is emptier than he thought he had to be. That is maturity. So this would happen to people because they would see that they have been trying their whole life to create this line of reasoning and meaning and logic and this storytelling. But when one human is telling himself the story and is trying to tell himself how existence is, well, so many things can be said. It's not about the story. It's about the treasure you reveal within yourself. And suffering is the ability to see that you can no longer just confront your own dissolution, you can confront other people's dissolution. What that means is that early on I realized that change is happening and always happens. So I am only a temporal moment with certain temporal ideas, with certain activations, experiencing different methods and different views in which I create. This is my first identity-based experience. But once you realize the ability to have formless experience, that means that you can see the eternity that is found in nothingness. The empty no longer has to be empty when your vision into the cave meant there was intelligent life. There was observance. Intelligence has always been, in my mind, synonymous to greater observance. And so man, before he can do greater observance of other things, must do it of his own mind and realize, whoa, there's some stuff happening, there is some stuff happening to people around the world that is not being explained by the media well, or by any other information system that is giving it a comparison. There are many types of people. There's many types of human experience. What we believe in is, in a sense, making us accept a static idea about a changing process. You will always see that there's more to your beliefs because you're separating yourself from the other side. In other words, if many people around the world are, in a sense, suffering from this conversation where one mind is trying to explain something else to another mind, there needs to be an understanding that both ends are creative. Each person can find their way up the infinite ladder to see their infinite essence. You can perceive that. You can perceive that and, in a sense, experience that more than a story. That is what meditation, that is what they knew a while back, but it was never communicated to the West properly. Let yourself perceive. Your whole life in a moment of infinite presence. There's only so much I can say before you simply see where you stop being yourself. And you find that path. Because the healthiest thing for humanity is healthy ways of communicating. In other words, if I want to imagine a world where if I wanted to ask you something, the way I would behave was to push around and to steal it from you. Imagine everyone was stealing from everyone, and you would see that that is not a reality for a species that is learning from itself well. If you're violent, you're not learning from life. You're not being that sensitive to it a bit. I mean, sometimes violence is important. Sometimes you need to stand up for where you think your truth is. But if you believe you have no truth or you don't know, and you begin behaving in ways where you're not aware of where you're stepping, eventually you might fall off some cliff. And what that means is that you're putting yourself in more confusion because you're here to climb the mountain, not fall off cliffs. And when I say fall off cliffs, means that you find some ignorant, separate aspect of you, but everything is temporal. So if me saying, guys, I don't believe in imagination, I am ripping all those people in that nation off the map. You can't limit your experience by saying it's not there. In other words, you cannot say the tree doesn't have roots because you can't see it. You cannot say the origin of the awareness and the essence and the energy that we are, that spark of being, is more than the thinker. It was here first. The spark, the origin, the life of existence was here first before any form, any structure. So carry the truth of your being with you. In other words, it's something you're comfortable with yourself. And just simply be at peace. feel your truth and see how much you need to keep the story. We are intelligent. It is ignorant in an intelligent world of your that are stuck in their own program. No, you're not. There's intelligence here. There is also illusion. I'm not saying there's no illusion, but there's an intelligence beyond that illusion, and it is recognized when you have fell to the ground and your face is inches away from the surface of a still pond and you're looking into your own eyes and realizing that life will continue to live and there's no reason not to live in harmony or an ability to be able to handle both harmony and disharmony in a certain comfortable presence. In other words, your state of being is the ability for you to experience the unknown potential of a creative mind through the form of a changing ape. Life has transcendental qualities, and we must find this through the practice of our own, I guess, kind of discovery of your own sacrament, your sacredness. In other words, what that means is that it's not that there's something sacred. I mean, it's your mind. You're in a sense saying, okay, I'm going to trust. I'm going to follow my trust. And you see what trust is that sometimes people forget what is taking care of them. And they, in a sense, think that survival means we have to fight. The concept of fighting is not so far away from many aspects of rebellious self-reflection to your sense of love. And perhaps even one might find that death is more than hope and precious. Thank you.